So the first sequence post we have today is called Scientific Evidence, Legal Evidence, Rational Evidence. And it starts with Eliezer saying that suppose your good friend, the police commissioner, tells you in strictest confidence that the crime kingpin of your city is Wolke Wilkinson. As a rationalist, are you licensed to believe this statement? And basically goes on to point that our legal system would not imprison him on the basis of the police commissioner's statement, and there's lots of good reasons for this, but also that that doesn't mean that the police commissioner's statement is not rational evidence, and it would be really dumb for you to go up and insult Wolke if you were told this. So the definition of legal evidence is like a special protected class of evidence, but it's not the only level of evidence that people can and should take into account. He then goes on to extend this to say that science is made up of generalizations which apply to many specific or to many particular instances, so that you can run real-world tests and test these generalizations and verify for yourself that the generalization is true without having to trust anyone's authority. Science is publicly reproducible knowledge of humankind, and it also should be a protected pool of beliefs that's especially reliable. So it also has a different standard of evidence than just general rational evidence. All this working so far?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's been one of the things that, even since before I was introduced to rationality, that was a sales point for science. Because in the context of whatever, like high school, arguing with religious people, that was always a common comeback. Well, that's just like it's the same sort of thing. You believe it because Darwin said it. And
Science
it's
is your
like,
religion.
Yeah.
right. And like in all charity, it's not like the dumbest thing to say if you have no idea what either person's talking about. You look at someone saying, "Well, I think this and I think that." Well, what makes your beliefs more founded than theirs? And it's like, because I can go verify mine. And then they say, "Well, because I just believe them, or because
Yeah.
I believe real strong." Um, it is interesting. Like most of science is like publicly reproducible knowledge, and yet like I can't reproduce the results of the 2015 Large Hadron Collider experiments, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're theoretically like you could reproduce them and get the same results. Um, but yeah,
If I
it
had a
tends not
Large
to be
Hadron Collider.
economically feasible, and
Yeah.
also you might not have the expertise needed to do it.
Right. I think the important thing is that it's not revealed knowledge. That's the distinction. Like this
Yeah.
isn't something that like, oh no, I was told this through these magic tablets in a hat or in a dream or a waterfall told me or whatever. It's like, no, I went and looked on this island. I measured the beaks on these birds. You guys can all do the same thing if you feel like it. Um,
Yeah. You cannot
it's
reproduce special revelation from God, but not
right.
only can you reproduce the science stuff, the ways to reproduce it is publicly available so that people can test it, assuming, they have the ability.
Yeah, and that gets into the whole pet peeve or whatever of mine that like I really wish that there was more prestige to be had from doing replications.
Yeah. But we do have, because the scientific pool of knowledge is something that is supposed to be general and apply to many things, we want it to be a protected pool of belief that is especially reliable, and that we impose special strong additional standards before we canonize it as quote-unquote scientific knowledge. So he also then goes on to ask that, how about this hypothetical statement, the sun will rise on September 18th? Is that a scientific belief? And before we go forward, I want to know what you guys think, or if you have any opinions on that. Is that statement a scientific belief?
I'm pausing because I'm hesitant to answer anything with like put this in scare quotes and does this fit in this category or not. Um, I would say it is a rational belief, and it would I
Yeah, you can't you can't replicate it. Like you could wait and then record the sun rising, but the thing is
Hmm.
like uh, it depends on how pedantic you want to be. Um, like, does the sun rise or do we go around it?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, I guess
But
meaning will the Earth continue to turn on the 18th so that it looks like the sun is rising?
I think that's a scientific prediction. I don't know what like to say like I have a belief about the future. Um, you could say I predict that on August 18th the sun will rise or whatever September 18th whatever day it was.
Like based on
Um,
priors, the sun has risen.
well,
Uh,
even like as a scientist, you can just put your neck out and say, all right, I'll bet you $10 million it rises on the 18th of September, right?
Yeah,
but going by his definition, it has to be something reproducible,
yeah.
which I'm not sure if that means like a phenomena that you could record, uh, or that you have to actually like cause the thing to happen. I don't know. I think that's splitting hairs too much.
Yeah. He did. He basically said what you guys have said, that the the point of scientific knowledge is that it's generalizable. It's evidence. It's a system of generalizations, and so the whole point is to be able to make future predictions. And if you couldn't, it would be completely useless. But the actual prediction is based on his definition, not a scientific belief in itself. It's a prediction you make from scientific beliefs, and you could say that it's a prediction of this theory, but since it is a specific thing rather than a generalization, it's more of an experiment than a scientific belief in itself. Which I thought was an interesting distinction to make. I'm not sure. Well, no, I do know why that's in there because it relates to the next post. But when I read just this post itself, I was like, okay, that's an interesting distinction, and I can buy it. I'm not sure why it's being made here, but sure, why not? But yeah, it seems like a scientific belief is more like a belief along the lines of um, objects in motion tend to stay in motion, and the Earth is rotating, so it will tend to stay rotating unless something acts against it. And since we don't see anything coming to stop the rotation of the Earth anytime soon, it should continue to rotate, and so the sun should continue to rise. And thus we predict on September 18th it will. So, the beliefs are that the Earth is in motion and it will stay that way, whereas the sun will rise is a specific prediction rather than a scientific belief.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
don't have I don't have much like to split hairs there about. It's kind of interesting. Like Sam Harris makes that sort of broad case for science in the moral landscape, and uh, I guess rather than dive into that, it's worth at least checking out some short talk or essay that he gave about that book, or read the book. It's not that long and it's kind of fun, um, even if you think he's wrong. So it's just I mean, is it like a scientific statement? Is it a scientific question? I was going to go into examples, but it's kind of an aside. So,
Well, what was the thing that he said? Like the one thing that you said was the same.
um, well, it wasn't quite the same. It was just more like you give a kind of hashed out definition of like what it means for this to be scientific or not, and then through his lens, he's like, okay, well, um, because even the foundation of science comes with like fundamental values like um, uh, parsimony, intellectual honesty, evidence, that sort of stuff, then why don't we just go ahead and add into that value bucket like suffering is bad and not suffering is good, and then we can like then it's just a matter of plug and chug to figure out what works in the universe, just like we do with what makes rockets fly, right?
Oh, so it's a
Um,
utilitarian argument.
yeah, basically. Um, but like as far as like the little uh, they're not even quite puzzles. It's just like intuition pumps. It's like, is it a scientific question to ask how many birds are currently in flight around the world right now? Like, it's not one that we can answer even in in practice, maybe in principle. Um, well, definitely in principle, if we had a fully working simulation of the planet, then we could just, if bird in flight count increase one. But since we don't have that, the question is like a real question about reality, but is unanswerable. Is that therefore unscientific? It's like little things like that. So that's why I don't like. That's anytime I see science and stuff in quotes, it's kind of just I sometimes worry if they're splitting hairs, but that's not really the point Eliezer's making here, and yet I managed to make a non-related point for a minute and a half. So
That was
Well,
kind of related.
it's
I
not.
was gonna,
Yeah, it's. Go on.
I was yeah also gonna kind of rant a little bit about how frustrated I get by the fact that we don't really have like we don't tend to police the definition of science in the casual parlance as strongly as I would like. For example, every single shampoo or like makeup or
Oh my
it
God.
says like
Scientifically
scientifically proven
formulated?
to do X.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like with the power of science.
it's kind of like Rachel sent me this picture yesterday, which has been around for a long time, but it's like these hovering drones, and it's some news article covering it. It says they used code and algorithms to make it so the drones don't crash into each other.
Like, what else would they have used?
My standard reply to that is always just like, quote, they used words and sentences to write this book, end
Yeah.
quote.
I mean, I guess they didn't use bumpers that they attached to the robots.
Right. Which is kind of an algorithm. If you hit the bumper, go the other way. It's not one. It's not one that you have to code into it.
Yeah.
It's like a Roomba, but like aerial.
Right. Exactly. That's how real birds work, right?
Birds are weird. They have like magnetism sense.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, cool ass sense. Yes. So, on to the next post, which is related to this one and to what we've been talking about,
Yeah,
actually.
kind of what the last one was setting up.
Yeah. Is molecular nanotechnology quote unquote scientific? And did someone else want to drive on this one?
I will just point out that I don't know how we took the other ones out of order on the last episode. I'm totally fine with it because they were great. But this would have been perfect to follow up with the cryonics episode.
Yeah, I was
Because-
really disappointed we didn't.
Yeah,
Meh, they're here now.
the new LessWrong is in a different order, and I think we probably were on the new LessWrong and we like hit the next button or whatever. Because
Yes, if you hit the next and previous buttons, then they go. I believe they mirror the AI from
rationality
AI
of
to
the
zombies.
Or,
Yeah, exactly. Whereas the only way to get them in the original posting order is to go to that wiki page that's linked near the top, or right by where our.
yeah, apparently
right
we
by where our
forgot
accounts
to
are.
do that at the same time.
Yeah, it's all good. It happens.
That's all
They
right.
were really
I will.
like apt for the topic, I think.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, it's amazing how applicable to many topics most of these posts are.
Well, nobody knows why this one is applicable yet, so we should get into it.
So I'll just answer the question right away. Is molecular nanotechnology? All right, let me try this a third time. Is molecular nanotechnology scientific? And I'll just say yes.
Well, that does not at all help us get through the post, though, Stephen.
No, but I'm just prepared to like immediately bite that bullet and say yep.
Well,
Okay.
if I'm a scientist and I say that it's science, does that make it science? Or do I have to put a lab coat on first?
You need the lab coat. Otherwise,
How
how will people
expensive
know
is
you're
your
a
lab coat?
scientist?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Like all the people in those shampoo commercials. It's perfect.
All right, so it starts with, consider the statement, it is physically possible to construct diamondoid nanomachines which repair biological cells. Some people will tell you that molecular nanotechnology is pseudoscience because it has not been verified by experiment. But, he says, extrapolations of diamondoid nanomachines are based on standard physics, which is to say, scientific generalizations. Therefore, if you say that nanomachines cannot work, you must be inventing new physics. Or to put it more sharply, if you say that a simulation of a molecular gear is inaccurate, you must claim that atoms thus configured would behave differently from the depiction. Then either you know of a flaw in the simulation argument, or the simulation algorithm, sorry, or you're inventing your own laws of physics.
Yeah, I mean, I can still sympathize with the contender who's like, well,
You don't know it would work that way. We've never seen a molecular gear.
yeah, you're right. As I tried to formulate an argument to sympathize with, I found myself unable to.
well, then the
Like,
article itself, they say, what about the Wright brothers' attempt to build a non-biological, heavier-than-air powered flying machine? Was that pseudoscience?
Yeah. Because all flying machines crashed was always true before that.
And that's again, so pseudoscience is in quotes here. I have a kind of a knee-jerk thing about putting words like this in quotes, this is done in a well articulated and informative way, but it's like, okay, you're trying to make me make categories and shove things into either one of them, when it's like the I think our tendency to do that is kind of over-engineered.
No, I disagree. I
Like,
think words having specific meanings is really important.
but like, yeah, I agree. But if we try and like, I guess I just don't know if rather than like say, all right, which bucket does this go into? You just talk about the thing for a minute first, and then decide if it has to go into either of these buckets. Or I guess maybe we'll make a third bucket for plausible or probable or definitely doable but not done yet. And then we've got pseudoscience and science, right? So like the Wright brothers saying, no, I think our planes will work before any plane has ever worked before is not the same as a charlatan with crystals saying, well, of course we haven't, you guys don't believe the crystals have healed cancer yet. We haven't seen my crystals yet.
Right, but that's because the charlatan with crystals has no scientific generalization to go off of. Like when the Wright brothers, if they were confronted with this is pseudoscience, they would have said, look, here's the models of physics we're using. Everything should work out. What do you know about physics that we don't know that how are we simulating this incorrectly? Which is the same thing that someone who makes a nanomachine would, simulation would say, like, what do you know based on the generalized body of knowledge we have from science that I am misinterpreting? How am I using this knowledge wrong? So if someone claims that it's pseudoscience, the reason you put it in quotes is because it's not really pseudoscience. It's just science that doesn't have any precedence yet, but it looks like it should be right. Whereas real pseudoscience is like, Dr. Crystal's crystal magic, where he doesn't have any body of scientific knowledge that he's drawing on. He's just like, they're crystals, so magnets,
Well, they
man.
do things with vibes, I think.
Oh, vibes? Okay, yeah. They can vibrate differently and make you vibrate different, and there's not an actual scientific body of knowledge that supports any of that. It's just bullshit that has a sciencey sound to the words.
Totally. And it's one of those things like I think it's easy to at least give illustrations that aren't even historical illustrations that would persuade somebody from saying something that like, well, no, molecular nanotechnology is unscientific or cryonics is unscientific because we don't have any proof examples yet. And so like I think it would be informative to give the example of like, well, sure, we don't have any examples of humans being able to survive outside of the Earth-Moon orbit. But it seems like a very plausible belief to say that they could survive a trip to Mars under safe conditions. It's not like, but of course we haven't done that yet. So is that a unscientific thing to say? It seems kind of like splitting hairs between like the past and the future is the mistake that some people are making when they're throwing future tech that doesn't exist yet into the pseudoscience bucket.
Yeah. Yeah, he says that if you decide to make a strong positive assertion that nanomachines are impossible, you are being irrational. You are even being unscientific, because an ungrounded assertion that tomorrow the sun will not rise is unscientific, because you needlessly contradicted the best extrapolation from current scientific knowledge. And if you were to say that nanomachines are unscientific, you would also be needlessly contradicting the best extrapolation from current scientific knowledge. And I think, as you were saying, the same goes for cryonics, that if you are saying that these tissues cannot be preserved, what is making you say that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is actually about cryonics and AI.
It's definitely about AI, because that's what all the sequences are about.
The first time I went to a LessWrong meetup, I remember getting like schooled by the other members when they talked about total brain simulation or emulation, and I said that was impossible, and they basically had the same argument back at me, where it was like, it's very difficult. It would be very difficult. We can't currently do it. That doesn't mean that it's impossible.
Yeah. There's no reason to think that it's impossible.
And it took me a while of arguing with them until I started understanding, I guess, that they were, yeah, like this isn't the way that people casually or conventionally use like the word scientific or and like possible or impossible
Yeah.
kind of are used
Like,
to mean like very likely or very unlikely. Like we like
yeah, I
to we
mean,
like to exaggerate.
it could be impossible to simulate a human mind in silicon. Like, we don't know for sure that it isn't impossible, but all the current evidence says there's no reason to think that.
I was going off of I was remembering Ray Kurzweil had said something kind of silly about brain emulation that showed that he didn't understand neurons.
Mm,
I think he said that like we can take each neuron and encode it in like a few bits, and then it would only need this many bits or something like that. I forget. It was a long time ago, but
anyway.
so I was thinking that that was like the thing that people were proposing, and
Oh,
I guess it
okay.
was kind of an argument that like where we were kind of arguing about two different things, and it took us a while of kind of talking past each other to see. That's why I think it's important that words have specific meanings, because
Yeah.
um, yeah, like double cruxing on things, tabooing words, or making sure that words are defined really facilitates communication.
Yep.
I think that is the root of many of a disagreement where people are arguing about things that they're not actually uh, they're not they're not arguing about what they think they're arguing about, and so they run in circles chasing
I
down different positions where it's like, no, wait, let's just lay out what we actually believe. Okay, yeah, that's basically what I was going to say. What are we fighting about again?
Yeah, the thing is, I don't know how active you guys are on our Discord, but I'm on there a lot, especially now that I'm quarantined, and like half the arguments seem to be basically that. Like, people were arguing for the same thing but using different words, and it takes half a day to get there and actually understand there's no argument. And I don't know, the annoying part is that like if this argument was done face to face in the real world, it wouldn't be a big deal. First of all, it would go faster, but like people are also kind of nicer and more charitable when they're face to face with people, whereas online people are more likely to get snippy and like, oh, you're misrepresenting me on purpose, and that part kind of sucks. And it's
It's
just,
because you
I
can't read
really,
tone.
exactly, I want to give a mad shout out right now to my boy Three All Men because that dude is notorious on the Discord for steel manning the hell out of everything. But it's also just like a really good habit when you're in online spaces because, yeah, you can't see tone of voice. If you're grumpy for some reason, you slept bad, or you're hungry, you might like misinterpret things as more hostile than they actually are, and things spiral.
What does that
And like,
emoji mean?
yes,
Winky face?
yeah.
A
And like just,
sarcastic wink or a playful
I'm
wink?
actually
oh, you
glad
son
that,
of a bitch, sarcastic winking at me.
joking aside, I mean, I'm so glad that emoji or emoticons or whatever exist
It's
as
emoji.
opposed to not. Yeah, I guess it's emoji now. That was a terrible movie. Um,
Oh, well, yeah, the movie was bad, but
I
emoticon is
use
a
a lot
much
of
worse
GIFs
word.
too.
GIFs as well, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Slack, if you look at it, Discord's meh at it, but you just type in, the Giphy extension and then find an appropriate GIF that relates to it. It's like perfect. The English language wasn't enough, but that small, quiet picture is, or
Hmm.
quiet movie is.
This dancing cat wearing a fedora completely expresses what I was trying to get at here. I don't
That
even
rounds up my
mean,
argument
yeah.
perfectly.
Exactly. Yep.
This is such an aside, but I will be quick. There was this app, it no longer exists, I'm sad. There might be something similar, I don't know. But it was a chat app that you could only communicate with each other in GIFs.
Oh,
And my coworkers and I installed it, and it was like kind of the texting version of charades.
cool.
It sounds delightful.
It was really entertaining. It was more entertaining than it had any right to be, actually, which is probably why it doesn't exist anymore.
Oh.
Uh, so, are we done on this topic?
Yeah, the post ends that diamondoid nanosystems are possible is merely a best guess. It's merely based on qualitative, abstract, approximate, potentially falsifiable reasoning from beliefs already in the protected belief pool of science. Such a guess is not reliable enough itself to be added to the protective belief pool. It is merely rational.
Oh, yeah.
So,
And I forgot about falsifiability as well. But yeah, I'd add
yeah.
that to the list of requirements for something to be scientific. Yeah, based on based on facts, something you could observe or replicate yourself, something that has ways of falsifying it.
Yeah. So these things are not necessarily scientific beliefs, but they are rational beliefs based on the scientific pool. All right. So for next time, our LessWrong posts will be fake explanations and guessing the teacher's password, which is a famous one.